She sent her mother a text message that morning. "Happy Mother's Day. I love you, and I appreciate everything you do. Love, Bud. Call me." That was the last message Cassandra Bibbs ever received from her daughter. Her name was Wilanna Simone Bibbs. She was 20 years old. She had moved to Atlanta to become a singer, and this is her story.
I'm really a criminal trying not to be one. I'm so honest about it. I've been arrested for 26 violent felonies.
Oh my God.
All violent.
Who are you fighting?
Everyone. I love to fight. It's my favorite thing to do. That is my problem.
A man from Atlanta, Georgia is in the Scott County Jail today. He is facing first-degree murder charges. Davenport police say this started with a disturbance on Sunday afternoon. Today.
Before we go further, please like, comment, and subscribe if you find value in these discussions. Now let's get into it. Davenport, Iowa sits along the Mississippi River in the eastern corner of the state. It is a mid-sized Midwestern city, neat residential neighborhoods, a riverfront, the kind of place where Sunday afternoons are supposed to be quiet. May 9th, 2021 was a Sunday, Mother's Day. The kind of afternoon nobody expects to become a crime scene. At approximately 1:25 in the afternoon, Davenport police responded to the 1500 block of Calvin Street for what was reported as a disturbance. When officers entered the home, they found Wilanna Bibbs. She was 20 years old. She was pronounced dead at the scene by Davenport Fire and Medic. An autopsy would later confirm she had been shot in the back. The single bullet struck her spine, her heart, and her liver. She was shot in the back. That detail matters. We will come back to it. Standing in that house when officers arrived was 31-year-old Justin Wright, known professionally as J Wright, a multi-platinum songwriter from Atlanta with credits alongside Timbaland, Rick Ross, Future, DJ Khaled, Bow Wow, Cash Doll, and Nipsey Hussle. A man with a music industry resume that had opened doors across the genre. He did not run. He did not flee. He was still there when police came through the door. He was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. And the story of how a Mother's Day in Iowa became the last day of Wilanna Bibbs's life begins not in Davenport, but in Chicago, then Durham, then Atlanta, and in the specific danger that comes when someone with power and a violent history decides that the person they are with belongs to them. Wilanna Simone Bibbs was born on September 9, 2000 in Chicago, Illinois. She was the youngest of 4 children born to Thomas and Cassandra Bibbs. From the beginning, her family said she was something different, the kind of youngest child who fills every room she enters. Who makes people laugh without trying? Who carries enough warmth for everyone around her? When she was young, her family relocated to Durham, North Carolina. That is where Wilanna grew up. Durham is where she went to school, where she built her friendships, where her personality fully formed. And by every account from everyone who knew her, that personality was something. Playful, silly. The kind of person who made school bearable just by being there. Her friends remembered her as someone who was always surrounded by people, because people wanted to be around her. Her teachers noticed her kindness. Her family noticed her voice. Because from childhood, Wilanna could sing. Not just in the casual way that everyone can carry a tune. She could actually sing. And she knew it. And she had dreams built around it. Big dreams. The kind of dreams that feel very real and very achievable when you are 17 and you have a voice that makes people stop and pay attention. She was also thinking bigger than just music. Friends remembered her talking about nursing, about law, about becoming someone who could make a difference in people's lives in multiple directions at once. That was Wilanna, not one lane, but several. All moving forward at the same time. In 2019, she competed in the Miss Black Georgia pageant. She was stepping into entrepreneurship alongside her music, working on fashion and makeup alongside her pursuit of a singing career. She was 20 years old and she was already doing more than most people twice her age. Her mother, Cassandra, described her as someone who forgave easily, who never held grudges, who always believed in the good in people. That belief in the good in people is what brought her to Atlanta. Around 2019 or 2020, Wilanna made the decision that felt obvious to anyone chasing a music career. She moved to Atlanta, the city known as the Hollywood of the South, the hub of hip-hop, the place where industry connections could turn a voice into a career. She had the talent. She had the drive. She had everything she needed to make it. And then she met Justin Wright. Now let's talk about who Justin Wright actually was. Not who he presented himself to be, who he actually was. Because these are two very different things. On paper, Justin Wright was a success story. He had founded Camp Entertainment Worldwide in 2011 and built it into a company with genuine industry reach, multi-platinum credits, collaborations with some of the biggest names in the genre, a public profile as a music entrepreneur and mentor. He called himself J Wright in professional contexts, and he had the credits to back it up. But Justin Wright also had something else, a criminal record that stretched back years, with more than 24 arrests tied to violent incidents. 26 arrests by his own admission. All violent, every single one. He said this himself. In interviews and podcasts, he talked about his violent history with a kind of pride that was almost casual. He described himself as someone who loved to fight, who could not stay out of trouble, who stood on things to the point of being willing to go to jail, to die, or to kill behind them. Those were his words, not paraphrased, not exaggerated. His own words, on camera, describing himself as someone who loved to fight more than almost anything else.
I'm really a criminal trying not to be one. I'm so honest about it. Like I've been arrested for 26 violent felonies.
Oh my God.
All violent.
Who are you fighting?
Everyone. I love to fight. It's my favorite thing to do. That is my problem.
Walked into a relationship with a man who publicly described himself in exactly those terms. Wilanna did not know his full history when they met. Nobody in her position would have. You meet someone in Atlanta through the music industry who has legitimate credits and seems to know everyone and promises to open doors for you. That is not a situation where most 20-year-olds think to run a background check. What she encountered instead was a man who turned on his charm first and his control second. By the accounts of people who knew Wilanna and observed the relationship, the dynamic shifted quickly after it began. Justin started isolating her from the people she loved. He restricted her contact with family and friends. He monitored her communications. He persuaded her to cut off social media, which, for a young woman building a public profile as a singer, was a significant act of professional and personal control. He dangled the career she had moved to Atlanta for in front of her at the same time as he made her dependent on him. That combination, professional leverage and emotional control, is one of the most common patterns in abusive relationships involving younger people trying to break into industries where connections matter. He held the keys to a door she desperately wanted to walk through, and he used those keys as a leash. Her family watched all of this from Durham, and they were scared. Cassandra said she worried about who her daughter was associating with. She worried about the people Wilanna was around. Those worries were specific, and they were valid, and they were being communicated to Wilanna, who was not in a position to hear them clearly, because the man controlling her situation was standing between her and everyone who loved her. One incident in particular has been described publicly, and it tells you everything about how dangerous the situation had already become. During one altercation while they were in a car together, Wilanna was so frightened by Justin's aggression that she jumped out of the moving vehicle. She injured herself in the fall. She called her father, Thomas, crying and desperate. Her parents told her to come home. They begged her to leave. They made clear that whatever opportunities Atlanta was offering, no opportunity was worth this. But leaving is not simple when you are inside a controlling relationship. It is never as simple as just deciding to go. The person doing the controlling has built a structure around the relationship that makes leaving feel impossible, emotionally, professionally, and sometimes physically. Justin held power over Wilanna's dream. At the same time, he held power over her daily reality. Walking away from him meant walking away from everything she had moved to Atlanta to find. Cassandra Bibbs later said something that landed hard. She believed that Justin was jealous of the relationship she had with Wilanna, that the closeness between mother and daughter, the way they called each other, checked on each other, remained connected across the distance, threatened him. That a young woman who maintained a strong bond with her family was a young woman who was harder to fully control. He was right to feel that threat, but his response to it was to cut the connection instead of examine his own behavior. By May 2021, Wilanna had been in this relationship for a few months. She and Justin had moved in together. And the trip to Davenport, Iowa, a trip to visit Justin's relatives for a birthday celebration, was happening in the context of a relationship that was already coming apart. There is evidence that Wilanna was actively trying to leave. Family members described this to investigators. She had been pulling toward her own family more. She had been trying to reconnect with the people Justin had worked to separate her from. The calls to her mother that Mother's Day, 4 of them, back to back, were calls Cassandra missed and will spend the rest of her life wishing she had answered. On the morning of May 9, 2021, Wilanna texted her mother. She said, "Hey Ma, happy Mother's Day. I love you, and I appreciate you for everything you do. Love, Bud. Call me." Then she called, 4 times, back to back. Cassandra did not see the calls until it was too late to answer them. Something was already happening in that house on Calvin Street. The official trigger for what followed was an argument about $70. Justin accused Wilanna of taking $70 from him. That is the number. That is the stated reason. But here is what people who understand domestic violence and coercive control say about triggers like this one. The $70 was not the point. It was never the point. The point was control. The argument about money was a mechanism, a way to assert authority, to demand compliance, to demonstrate that nothing Wilanna did or had was fully hers without his permission. Men who kill their partners in this kind of relationship do not do it because of the stated argument. They do it because the stated argument represents something larger, a moment where the person they have been controlling refuses to comply, or signals in some way that they are done. Wilanna was 20 years old, and she was trying to leave. And Justin Wright understood, on some level, that he was losing his grip on the situation he had constructed around her. Neighbors heard arguing inside the house on Calvin Street. That argument reached a point where Wilanna picked up her phone and called her best friend, Kaylin Adams. She told Adams that her boyfriend was going to kill her. Those were her words. "He is going to kill me," said out loud, to her best friend, minutes before it happened. Adams testified at trial that the call came in at 1:05 in the afternoon. Wilanna was crying and screaming. She sounded like she was breathing heavily and running. Adams could hear vehicles in the background. At 1:25, police received the call about a disturbance at the house on Calvin Street. 20 minutes. That is how much time passed between Wilanna telling her best friend she was going to be killed and police arriving at the scene to find her body. When officers checked the house, they found blood before they found Wilanna. Her body was discovered in the garage. She had been shot once in the back. The bullet struck her spine, her heart, and her liver. She was shot in the back. That is not the trajectory of a confrontation. That is not a shot fired face to face in an escalating altercation. A person shot in the back is a person who turned away. A person who was trying to leave. A person who was running. She told her friend he was going to kill her. She was running, and he shot her in the back. Justin Wright was still at the house when police arrived. He did not attempt to flee. He was arrested without incident. At his initial court appearance, he claimed financial hardship and requested a court-appointed attorney. He told the court he had no income and had been living out of hotels after his belongings were stolen. The man who had once co-written songs for Timbaland and Rick Ross was claiming poverty. The industry figure who had built Camp Entertainment worldwide and collected multi-platinum credits was asking for a public defender. Whatever his career had been, it was clearly in a different place than the image he had presented to Wilanna when they met. He entered a plea of not guilty. To Wilanna's family, that plea was its own wound. The denial of something that had been documented, witnessed, and survived by the people in that house. The refusal to acknowledge what everyone already knew. The case moved slowly. Iowa courts operate on their own timeline, and between the arrest in May 2021 and the start of the trial in late March 2023, nearly 2 years passed. 2 years during which Cassandra and Thomas Bibbs carried the weight of their daughter's death without resolution. 2 years during which Wilanna's family had to exist in the space between knowing what happened and waiting for a system to process it. Cassandra spent that period talking publicly about Wilanna. She shared her daughter's story in the hope that it might reach someone else in a similar situation. She said, "Maybe it will help somebody else going through domestic violence." That became the framework she placed around her grief, not just mourning, but warning. The trial began in Scott County District Court on March 28, 2023. Judge Tamra Roberts presided. Scott County Attorney Kelly Cunningham led the prosecution. She laid out the sequence clearly. Wilanna moved to Atlanta to pursue her music career, met Justin Wright, began dating, and eventually living with him, and was in Davenport visiting his relatives when he shot her on Mother's Day. The defense, led by attorney Thomas Beckenbaugh, tried to introduce uncertainty. He told jurors that the physical evidence would show there was other DNA on the pistol. He told them that witnesses would testify they were not there or were unsure of what they heard. He suggested there was room for reasonable doubt about Justin's state of mind at the time of the shooting. But Kaylin Adams took the stand and told the jury what Wilanna had said to her at 1:05 in the afternoon, that her boyfriend was going to kill her, that she was crying and screaming and running, and there were vehicles in the background. "She was my best friend," Adams told the jury. "She was like a sister to me." Family members testified about Justin's controlling behavior, about the isolation, about how he had worked to separate Wilanna from her loved ones, and how she had been trying to reconnect with them in the weeks leading up to her death. The prosecution also used Justin's own public statements against him. The interviews where he bragged about his love of fighting. The descriptions of himself as someone who stood on things no matter the consequences. The confession by podcast of a man who had spent years performing his own volatility as a kind of brand. He had told the world who he was. Prosecutors made sure the jury heard it.
That was Ann's friend that I was messing with for a second, and then I found out she was Ann's friend, and I stopped talking to her, and my mom really liked her, and they still be talking. We still have communication because, I don't know, we still talk from every once in a while. She sent me some money that she owed me earlier.
She sent you money earlier today? She sent you money?
Mm-hmm.
What? How'd she send your money?
Apple Pay, because I don't have,
okay.
You know what I mean?
How much money did she owe you?
It was just my money that I had sent to her that she hadn't sent back to me. It was like $1,200.
So you guys were kind of seeing each other until you figured out she was friends with Ann?
I
just talking?
I met her. I originally met her through Ann. And then me, her, and Ann had a threesome one time.
After 8 days of trial, closing arguments concluded. The jury began deliberating on April 10, 2023. They deliberated for 90 minutes. 90 minutes. For a first-degree murder case. That is how long it took 12 people to look at everything the prosecution had presented and reach a verdict. Guilty. First-degree murder. Wilanna's family, appearing via video conference at the sentencing hearing on June 14, 2023, finally had the verdict they had been waiting almost 2 years for. Judge Tamra Roberts had no discretion under Iowa law. A first-degree murder conviction carries one sentence and one sentence only. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justin Wright stood silent as the sentence was delivered. He offered no statement, no apology, no acknowledgement of Wilanna's name or what her death had cost the people who loved her. Wilanna's father, Thomas, addressed the court directly. He said his daughter had been killed over $70. He called Justin the very clown he had once warned his daughter about. Cassandra spoke through tears. She called Wilanna her sweetheart and her sweet baby, a forgiving soul who never held grudges, who always saw the good in people. She said her faith was the only thing carrying her through, but the absence of her daughter was a wound that would never heal. Other family members spoke too. Some said they could not forgive Justin. Others said forgiveness was God's to give, not theirs. But the common thread running through all of it was grief. Grief for a 20-year-old woman who had been full of dreams and full of voice and full of everything a life is supposed to be full of. As the sentencing concluded and Justin Wright was being escorted from the courtroom, his mother, Mamie Williamson, stood and asked if she could say goodbye to her son. The deputy shook his head and walked Justin out of the room. After the sentencing, Justin filed an appeal with the Iowa Supreme Court. As of the most recently available records, the appeal has not overturned the conviction. He is serving life without parole. Now let's sit with this case for a moment. Because Wilanna's story is not just a crime story. It is a story about what happened when a specific set of circumstances aligned around a specific young woman, and what we can learn from the shape of those circumstances. Wilanna Bibbs was 20 years old. She was talented. She was ambitious. She had left her family in Durham and moved to a city she did not know to chase a dream that was completely legitimate. That is not recklessness. That is what young people with ambition do. That is what every singer, every actor, every artist does when they decide the life they want requires them to go somewhere else and build it. Justin Wright was 31 years old. He had industry connections. He had credits. He had the appearance of someone who could help her career go somewhere. And he had 26 prior arrests, all violent, and a documented history of aggression that he bragged about publicly. The gap between what he presented and what he was is the gap that Wilanna fell into. She believed in the good in people. Her mother said this repeatedly. That was not a flaw, that was a quality. The problem is that when you believe in the good in people, you are vulnerable to people who perform goodness while concealing what lies underneath it. Justin Wright performed the role of industry mentor and devoted partner while simultaneously isolating her from her family, monitoring her movements, and operating on a hair trigger of violence that he had publicly described to anyone who would listen. The car incident, the moment where she was so frightened she jumped from a moving vehicle, should have been the breaking point. Her parents urged her to leave. She knew it was dangerous. But she was also 20 years old, and her entire professional future felt like it was attached to the man she was being asked to walk away from. That is not naivety. That is the specific trap of coercive control. You do not get to walk away cleanly because leaving feels like losing everything. Not just the relationship, but the career, the connections, the version of the future you moved across the country to find. The community discussion around this case includes a theory that has never been legally established but refuses to stop circulating. That the argument about $70 was not the real reason. That Wilanna was actively trying to leave the relationship and Justin knew it. That what he was responding to when he shot her in the back was not the $70, but the realization that his control over her was collapsing. Those 4 phone calls to her mother that morning. The text wishing Cassandra a happy Mother's Day and asking her to call. The call to Kaylin Adams saying he was going to kill her. The running. The vehicles she was moving through when she called for help. This was a woman trying to get out, and he shot her in the back while she was trying. The defense tried to introduce doubt about premeditation, but Iowa law defines premeditation not as months of planning, but as deliberate thought in advance of the act. And Wilanna told her best friend he was going to kill her 20 minutes before it happened. Whatever was happening in that house in the 20 minutes between that call and the arrival of police, it did not look like an impulsive act. It looked like something building toward an outcome that Wilanna already knew was coming. The jury reached a verdict in 90 minutes. That is the fastest possible read on how persuasive the prosecution's case actually was. Justin Wright is in prison for the rest of his life. There is no parole. There is no release. There is no future version of the story where he walks out of a facility and starts over. That is the legal outcome. It is the right legal outcome. But Wilanna Bibbs does not get a future either. She does not get to record the album she moved to Atlanta to make. She does not get to perform on stages she was good enough to stand on. She does not get to call her mother back. She does not get to grow up. She was 20 years old. Her mother said, "We are just saying share Wilanna's story. Maybe it will help somebody else going through domestic violence." That is the ask. Not just to know what happened, but to learn from its shape. To understand that the warning signs in Wilanna's relationship, the isolation, the monitoring, the violence that erupted early and clearly, the jump from a moving vehicle, the calls to family she was not supposed to be making, were all visible before the end. They were visible, and they were not enough, because the systems around a young woman in that situation are not designed to protect her before the violence reaches its worst form. They are designed to respond after. If you are in a relationship where someone is cutting you off from your family, limiting your contact with people you love, monitoring where you go and who you talk to, that is not love. That is ownership. And ownership does not become love when you give it more time. If you are in a relationship where you have already been frightened enough to jump from a moving car, that is not a rough patch. That is a documented pattern of behavior that will not improve. If someone you love is in a relationship where these things are happening, tell them, not once. Keep telling them, keep showing up, keep making sure they know the door is open, and you will be on the other side of it whenever they are ready. Because Wilanna was calling her mother 4 times that morning, she was reaching for the connection that Justin Wright had spent months trying to sever. She was reaching, at the end, for exactly what her mother had always offered her. She did not get to hear Cassandra's voice. Wilanna Simone Bibbs was born on September 9, 2000. She died on May 9, 2021. She was 20 years old. She had a voice that made people stop and listen. She had dreams that were big enough to move across a state for. She had a mother who called her sweetheart, and a father who tried to warn her, and a best friend who picked up the phone when she needed her most. She had everything. Say her name. Wilanna Simone Bibbs. I hope this story helps you recognize the warning signs and encourages you to seek help or offer support before it's too late. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching.